30th of April 1975, our family, we took a very big boat. This boat had 3,628 people, including many people who were part of the Saigon government and the public servants and even the army. I knew this when I was growing up, but what I didn't understand was my father's personal story. My father is kind of like a real person, but to me sometimes he's like a ghost to me. So I always talk to him like a ghost, like, "Father, please tell me something," and there's no answer. Mất em rồi, xa em rồi, hoa đã tàn, ri đã phai. Chiều hôm nay trời thanh vắng, anh đi về, về với ai. My father, because he was a journalist, he kept a lot of records and a lot of newspaper. This is a picture of the Chung Swan boat over here, and there's another picture of it over here. And you can see here we were in another newspaper. We were part of a few hundred refugees that came here about June 1975. I knew this poster when I was growing up, but what I didn't understand was my father's personal story. He didn't talk about his personal life. I don't know anything about his father or mother, brothers or sisters. I actually had a lot of questions growing up because my parents, they divorced when we came here after a few years, and my father had a lot of personal issues, and I was separated from my mother for a long time. So I didn't grow up learning Vietnamese. There wasn't anyone to really teach me. My father had a mental health crisis, and there was a lot of distance between my father and also my mother, so I wasn't allowed to see my mother either for a very long time. But I've reconnected with her in the last, quite a few number of years, and so I've understood a little bit more about my story, but there's still many questions that I would like answers to. I think probably in my 20s, when you start to read a lot of books at university, you read a lot of things about the war and you always have more questions, And when I went to Vietnam to understand a little bit more about the American Army base or where the certain battlefields, I've even been to Dien Bien Phu, the battle, the Viet Minh Army against the French. I've been to that battlefield as well. They're very interesting areas, but still it didn't answer my father's personal questions. And then I realized there's a big hole in my life. There's a lot of things I want to know, and it makes me really upset and confused and very emotional. And my mother sometimes tells me a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then I can build the picture up. And it's taken me 55 years to come here today just to try to understand. I know a little bit, and I still need to know more.
Ông Lương Ngọc Hải là một ký giả lão thành, hoạt động trong báo giới với nhiều bút hiệu như Hoàng Hải, Phan Quân, Hà Mỹ Hạnh, người Sydney hay người trong phủ. Trong đó, một phần lớn kho tàng viết lách của ông tập trung vào chính sự, để lại nhiều bài viết về lịch sử, chính trị và những biến động của Việt Nam. Từng tham gia Việt Nam Quốc dân Đảng trong thời kỳ chống Pháp, nhà báo Lương Ngọc Hải đã đi qua nhiều bước ngoặt dữ dội của thế kỷ 20. Từ dấu ấn của khởi nghĩa Yên Bái, trận Điện Biên Phủ đến những cuộc khủng hoảng chính trị tại miền Nam Việt Nam. Ông từng là tù nhân chính trị ở cả hai miền, bị giam tại hỏa lò ở miền Bắc, rồi bị đày ra Côn Đảo sau cuộc đảo chính bất thành với chính quyền Ngô Đình Diệm ngày 11 tháng 11 năm 1960. Sau khi chính quyền nhà Ngô sụp đổ năm 1963, ông được trả tự do và trở về Sài Gòn. Những thứ ấy xảy ra trước khi Lương Ngọc Hải trở thành cha của Lương Đắc Thắng. Và bởi vậy, Thắng đã rất khó khăn để hiểu về những biến động chính trị phức tạp này.
It's hard for me to imagine and reconcile. I've read a lot about the French colonial period. The French colonial period, we're looking at a regime like they kept a file. They kept a record of you. So if you did some activity, you probably had a file about you, and they were monitoring you. And he probably was aware of not only that situation. But because of the Vietnamese politics, it's so complex that he was probably always looking over his shoulder about his own safety. I think he wrote under different names because of the different political context he found himself, whether it's in Vietnam or whether in Sydney. I think he had a lot of fear. I went to Vietnam first time 1993, and after I came back 1994, my sister, we bought a plane ticket because I was very emotional. I thought, oh, Father, Dad, you need to go and see the old country. He agreed. We got a passport for him. We bought the plane ticket for him. He didn't do anything. He didn't go. He cancelled the ticket. He didn't want to go. He couldn't do it. I give my mother a lot of credit about telling you some of the stories today. So she's able to translate some of the stories. Her partner, her husband. So after my parents' divorce, she met another kind man, and my stepfather. So he helped me translate some of the stories. So through some of these translations, I have a very deep sense of him being very busy, but he even in his own handwriting, he doesn't write about in any detail about his mother or his father or his brothers or anything like that at all. He doesn't mention them at all. It's almost as though he wants to forget whatever event happened to him, however bad or that situation was at home. If it was that bad, he doesn't want to acknowledge it in his writing at all. I like to think that my father, if he had better health, so I like to think that in the first 10 years, if his mental health had been better, I like to think that if he had been able to get some kind of treatment, even Vietnam, some mental health treatment in Vietnam, maybe some of the things that I experienced, his moodiness and all that behavior I saw, the anger. And don't get me wrong, he was very polite with all his friends and everybody, but when he came home, he was a different version of somebody you wanted to be your father, but you didn't know how to solve any issues because he didn't know how to solve it himself maybe. I feel connected more to the community now, and I understand a little bit more about trying to work out why is it that the Vietnamese went to America, why is it the Vietnamese went to France, why did they go to Canada? And sometimes in the narrative that gets complex because people have some feelings or some political events in the past that means you cannot come together to try to talk about an issue. It's too hard for them. I think the younger people in Vietnam, they may not know as much about the old colonial days and all that kind of thing, the things that interest me. That's really, really old historical events, I think for me, I can maybe share some of those stories with them, and if I meet some younger people, they can share some stories how they grew up with Vietnam. I like to see some interaction between the younger generation so that we can try to come somewhere in the middle of a dialogue to say, hey, we don't understand some things, but that's okay. Maybe we can still connect in some way, maybe through music, maybe through some other way. The way I reconcile is I keep singing, I try to sing, and that makes me feel better about my connection with the community and with my relatives and my mother, and it's one way of engaging in a positive way, I think. Look, my mother said to me many years ago, your father was your father. You can't change your father. That's the way he was. You just have to accept. In Buddhism, you have to accept the past. You can't change it. You just have to accept it, and then from there, you accept some some of your own conflict, your own trauma. You accept your own weaknesses, and then you try to get help. I've tried to get that mental health counselling just to help me to process things. And I might mention there's a group in southwestern Sydney. They give a free service, and they give counselling for any Vietnamese person who has any trauma, any difficulty in terms of counselling. And I found that process really good. Some people, they probably don't feel that they need it, but I think that's a good service that people can use to help them bring out some of the things that's inside them for such a long time. And I think men have more difficulty talking about emotion. Men maybe like to drink a lot, to cover the emotion or something like that. For me, I feel a bit sad about that when I hear other people's family story, and there's a little bit of a story, the broken family. There's something complex in the family, and I hear it on so many levels in the Vietnamese community. And it makes me sad that the right help is not there for some people.